Hi there, thanks for tuning in. This YouTube recording is of myself, Ashley Barnett, and Bob Davy, one of our authors at Barnform Publishing. We're going to be talking about Bob's recent books, In Case of War, Break Glass, Parts 1 and 2. And we're going to hear a bit about Bob's career in aviation and insights into what it's like to fly a warbird in real life. So, without further ado, Barnform Publishing we set up in September 23, and since then we've had a host of authors, plenty from military history kind of backgrounds, but also other genres, including fiction. And where Bob's books fit in really nicely is that crossover of military history fiction. So we're really pleased to have him with us. Bob, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Bob Davy, and I'm a '60s child, Generation X, and I learned to fly at Southend Airport in the '70s, and worked in a supermarket to get my flying hours up, and then I joined the Royal Air Force as a VR, and I trained with the Air Force for 5 years off and on, and then the Fleet Air on. But ultimately, I lost my medical. I'm as blind as a bat, which is why you often see me in the press or on magazine covers with glasses on my face. And I'm, as I say, blind as a bat. Uh, I retrained commercially and never lost the bug to want to be a military warbird pilot. And I had a successful airline career over 30 years. But I also had a parallel career as a writer, a journalist. I started writing in 1990 for Flyer, and and then I moved on to Pilot Magazine, who I still work for as a freelance pilot and writer. And and as soon as I could afford it, I bought my first warplane or trainer, and I bought a Yak 52 share in the early 90s. Flew that for a few years. I moved on and up to a faster plane, which was a Nanchang CJ6, a Chinese derivative of the Yak 18, and again campaigned that initially solo, and then as a two ship. We were called the Chang Gang. I did that until 2015, and then I finally literally made a heap of my winnings and went out to Florida and did a P51 course, the full type rating at Stallion 51. And I did that over exactly 10 years ago, literally right now. So the end of January 2015, I went out there. When I came back, I had to try and fund what I'd done, and I wrote stories all over England and Europe, and I got an incredible invite to go out and fly Scat 7 in Belgium, which was Robin Old's P51. And Robin Olds, ironically and not coincidentally, is the loose core character in my novels, In Case of War, Break Glass, Part 1 and Part 2. It started the warbird thing really rolling for me. I got introduced to Christina Olds, Robin Olds' daughter, and I actually flew that P51 for a few times in 16, 17, 18, and before things worked on my side, and I ended up being able to get myself my own warbird, which is this one, which is a Yak 3, which I'm sure you've seen if you've followed anything I've done. And since then, I've campaigned that Yak for the last 5 years, all over the UK and Europe. So in my parallel career, I became a journalist, as I said, in 1990, and it led me to, people told me that I could put them in the cockpit, and I have read every single book that you could possibly read in my life, from Douglas Bader to um, all the famous pilots. I can't come up with them right now, and I'm still reading them. I've just read this one, which is a fantastic old book. You say out of print, but it's a brilliant
Mm.
book. This one, which is again brilliant research material for my third book, which I'm just about to write, and an old historical, not facts book. Let's say all out of print, but you can find them on Amazon. And I realised that no one ever taught me how to start a Merlin engine, how to taxi a Spitfire, which rudder pedal to press on takeoff, and it was always dumbed down by probably either the writer or the editor at the time, because they didn't want to alienate the general public. And life changed for me when I saw the film Master and Commander in 2003. And as a result, I bought the 21 and a half novels of Patrick O'Brien, where he basically teaches you Old English and how to sail a Napoleonic era battleship. And I thought, well, if he can do that, why can't I do that and write a technical novel for people who really want to know in the 21st century how to start a Merlin and which foot to press on takeoff on a Merlin engine Spitfire, and how do you put the gear up and how do you fly the plane. So that's why I wrote my two novels. They're a series of five. If I live long enough, I did have a big gap between the first and the second. I had 12 years. So I wrote the first one in 2008 between jobs. And then I wrote the second one in 2020, 21 during COVID, where I lost my job as an airline pilot. Ironically, that's life. I didn't go back to the airlines. I do other things now. I still fly commercially. I'm a business development manager at Kemble Airport, Cotswold Airport, in Gloucestershire, and I carry on writing to this day. So I'm just going to scratch my nose. Excuse me. Uh, and have a glass of wine. See, I'm a big fan of Keith Floyd as well.
Hmm.
So so that's why I wrote the novel, and that's where we are today. So I'm still writing. I'm still a journalist. I still fly Warbird. I still do air shows. I don't do the airline flying anymore. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I think it perhaps is the perfect CV for someone to have written a book as you have. I think the Master and Commander comparison is really brilliant. I wish they made more of the films
Oh,
to back up the novels. Um,
ironically, Peter Weir bought six of my first novel. He bought six. His secretary phoned me and told me, and I was, really hoping for a little while that he might actually do a technical film about the Battle of Britain and after, based on on my book, because it's got the same theme to it. It hasn't happened yet. Never know.
yeah.
I'll tell you if he buys six of book two.
I think there's definitely. I mean, you mentioned about the some of the earlier books and how either by writer or by editor or somewhere they'd kind of been dumbed down, and I think the audience these days is perhaps more receptive to that technical information.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There's, I guess, obviously technology's moved on, people's understanding, information's so more accessible than it has been in the past, where, people may have just relied on books, perhaps, some television, whereas now, if, you probably could fire up YouTube and, find a suitable video to get you to most things. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think having obviously read both of your books several times, there is so much in there which I was reading, and I've had the pleasure of back seating in a Spitfire, and I could kind of relate to what you were saying and understand a bit more about the experience that I had because the pilot wasn't speaking to me and telling me, "Oh, I'm trimming this and
Yeah,
doing this and
which
so
I
on."
don't get. You pay £2,500 for 20 minutes in the air if you're lucky,
Yeah,
and they don't tell you anything. Some of them don't. Some of them do.
yeah,
I'm not destroying my peer group at
no,
all here, because I know a lot of the guys are very on it and realise that this is just a one-off, incredible opportunity to someone
Mm.
to blow a lump of their pension or boyhood dream or whatever it is that they're doing. But that sort of technical thing, that technical angle, I'm not the first to do it. Patrick O'Brien, I think, was, but he certainly was 30 years before me. But uh, other things are coming, and I think that is a thirst for knowledge and
Mm.
not to be dumbed down to. And that was why I did the book. So that's really it. That really was the theme,
Mm.
and to try. And I've had it. I just absolutely, literally today, an not an editorial colleague, a journalistic colleague of mine from Pilot magazine. I'm not going to say which one. Actually said, I feel like I could fly a Spitfire now, and I feel like I could maybe fly a Mustang. I that's what I'm trying to achieve with my books, and I'll carry on. Actually, I said Mustang. Mustang appears in book 3, not book 2.
So,
I'll,
spoiler of what's to come.
yeah, I've given the gaff away. Yeah, so book 1 is Hurricanes and Spitfires. Book 2, Spitfires. Book 3 will be the Mustang. And Robin Olds was unusual in that um, there's a hell of a story with him. He married a Hollywood actress, uh, and they were so powerful then, the studios. She said to the studios, I won't make any more films if you send him to Korea. So he didn't go to Korea, and he didn't know why. And he was driving a desk, and it was only long after they got divorced in I think the 1960s, that he found out that she basically suppressed his career because she didn't want to lose him when they were still in love, to go to Korea. But after they got divorced, guess what? He went to Vietnam, and his exploits in Vietnam are equal, if not more, than what he did in World War II. So he flew the F-4 Phantom in Vietnam, and probably his most famous exploit was Operation Bolo, where they pretended they were Thunder Chiefs, thuds, and flew the same patterns with the same call signs to bring the MiGs up, because the MiGs could pick off the thuds, but they were in Phantoms, and they basically shot down the Vietnamese Air Force in one morning. I think 8, it might have been 7 or 8, I don't know. MiGs that they brought down, and Robin was just a legend. I never met him. I wish I had. I think he's the bee's knees. A colleague of mine, Paul Bonham, met him before 2008, before he died, and he said he shook you by the hand, which means he literally lifted you up and down by your hand. He said he was just everything that you'd expect of him to be, an incredible man. My books 3, 4, and 5 will loosely follow where he ended up, and that's why I did what I did.
And it's probably worth talking about the title. So can you explain what the kind of the inspiration for the title is?
Yeah, so they in the Pentagon, he was so legendary. He was a wild man, and especially when he was young in World War II. And I think in the Vietnam, um, he drove a Harley Davidson through a bar with a hooker on the back seat, naked, and things like that. I don't know if that's true. Christina, his daughter, will sue me if I'm wrong. But um, and in the end, they said that he should live in a fire case. And if you remember or don't remember or have seen history, historical photographs, you see these fire cases in hotels where it's like a glass case and it's got a fire hose in it, and it says "in case of fire, break glass." And they said he should have one in the Pentagon, and he should live in a case, and it should say in case of war, break glass. So that's where the title came from, and no one had claimed it. So that was why I wrote it into book one and two now. And ironically, 2016, I went out for dinner with Christine for the first time, and the operator and owner of Scat 7, his last Mustang, which he had 4 kills in before he moved on from World War II, and she said, "Bob, oh, can I have a quick chat?" And I said, "Go on." And she said, "Look, I know your books are called In Case of War, Break Glass. Would you mind if we used that title? Because they've asked me to do a painting of my dad and stick it in the Pentagon." And I said, "Come on. Do you think I'm not going to let you have your title of your dad?" So she's now, or probably done it by now, but she's done a painting of her father, and it hangs in the Pentagon by now. I haven't seen her for a couple of years, so I'll have to give her a call and see how she's getting on with that.
Oh, that's brilliant. So diving into the book, so as you say, so instead of it being, the story of Robin Olds per se, it takes the shape of Flight Lieutenant Harper. So
Yeah.
how would you describe Harper?
Um, it, Very much of his time, he resembles one of the gentleman pilots of the Royal Air Force. So you had the RAF VR, yeah, and then you had the RAF mainstream,
Mhm.
and then you had the ancillary squadrons, and they said that, oh crikey, I can't remember how it goes now. You'll have to edit this. Um, it's something like God, what were they called? The 303, 300 squadrons. Um, they said that Can we cut off this?
Not probably not, but
Oh,
we
okay.
can
Don't
try.
worry about it then. Okay. Anyway, you keen people out there will know what I'm talking about. But basically, they said the VRs were um, officers trying to be gentlemen. No, that's right. The mainstream RAF were officers trying to be gentlemen. The ancillaries were gentlemen trying to be officers, and the VR were neither trying to be both. And the basically he was one of the 300 squadrons, this character that I've invented, who were gentlemen pilots of the 30s, who auxiliary is the word, sorry, got it in the end, the auxiliary RF. And they almost treated the RF like a flying club in the 30s, but then obviously when war happened, they were brought in. So they were gentlemen pilots that came into the Royal Air Force. So Harper's one of them, and I've written him up as an Irish American, and I'm going to give something away here. That's a little sort of script part that you won't get from the books, but I'm going to give it away. So I'm a big fan of Sharp, the TV series called is it Cornwall, who wrote them,
Tony
and
Cornwall, yeah.
yeah, and and at the end of the Sharp series, Sergeant Harper goes back to Ireland with a bag of gold and becomes a gentleman. So the reason that my character is called Tom Harper is because he's his great great grandson. And so by that time they were gentry in Ireland, and Harper comes back with as a gentleman Irishman. And ironically, I'm not trying to flog books, but the Hat book, if you ever get a chance to get that book on Amazon, it's way out of print. But that bloke was an Irish gentleman mercenary pilot, and I've just got that, and that's part of my research for part three. You can't make it up. Honestly, the coincidences and weird stuff that's gone on
Mm.
in my life that's made me end up as an author instead of just a journalist and a whatever you want to call me, warbird pilot, airline pilot, whatever. Um, are astonishing, and it just makes me crack up all the time. And for instance, if you read the books, and you have read the books, um, the letters in the books.
Mm.
Um, my friend, who had a share in a military trainer with me, is also a property developer. In the early 90s, he went to do a flat in Brixton in South London. And he found a swatch of original correspondence from a World War II pilot to his cousin. And the guy was called J.B. Healy. And he was writing to his cousin Eric. And they were the best letters to read. They were absolutely of their time. And you've read them. You've read them in the book. They are
Mm.
real. They are all real. And I tried to chase down J.B. Healy's descendants. I think that the person whose flat my friend found these letters in was probably the guy he was writing to in the 40s. Unfortunately, something else happened and the letter stopped. I can't reveal because it's part of the plot of book 3. But I reproduced those letters almost word for word
Mm.
in my books. And unfortunately, the letters ran out, so I had to recreate my own in his vernacular for book 2 at the end of book 2, and just use the same language things and everything. And just incredible things happened around, my book. And another thing, when in book 2, when Harper's walking through the creepy wood, as he calls it, well, I remember running through that wood 20 years ago and getting the creeps when I ran through a part of that wood, and I didn't know what it was. And then one day, my son, who's now grown up, but it was at the time was maybe 10, 12, 14, got an interest in aviation archaeology. So he said to me, to Dad, is there like an aircraft wreck site we could visit to like look around? And I asked my friend Jock. Well, Jock is in the book. That is the real Jock. And in fact, I was there today giving him his book 2 because he's in the book. They're all the characters in my book are real people. And Jock at the time, who used to go to these wreck sites as a teenager 50 years ago, said, yeah, there's one in Burchett's Green, right near Whitewatham, where I live. And he gave me the lat and long, and I looked. And do you know what? That's exactly where I used to get the creeps when I used to run through that wood. I didn't know anything about it. And we got a German pilot at Whitewatham called Arndt. He's a smashing bloke. And he's as straight as a die, this guy. And fantastic character, brilliant pilot, airline pilot, flies military stuff and all sorts. And we were talking and about this, and Arndt went, "Oh yes, oh yeah, it's a creepy wood, yeah, And it was like, oh, it's not just me then. I get the creeps when I go through that bit. This Halifax bomber came into this wood on fire on a 1,000 bomber raid, and it blew the biggest crater. It's still there. You can visit it. It's Burchett's Green
Mm.
in Berkshire, near Maidenhead, and hallowed ground. People still respect the site. There's a memorial plaque. The pilots were from, I think, New Zealand, Australia, etc. There are flags in the trees to commemorate them. It's a real
I think I've
emotional.
actually been there. Now you've described it to me.
Yeah,
When you started off with the wood, but now you've described the scene, I've actually visited there as well, and it's
yeah,
as you say, it's definitely
bloody great
an awe
crater.
about it.
When you look closer, you start seeing the more of the damage, that because it flattened a
Mm.
quarter square mile of ground because all the bomb load went off. It took the roofs and tiles and windows out of all the cottages a quarter of a mile away. Obviously, it blew all the trees down. And when you look, you can actually see burned out tree stumps around that site, obviously all overgrown. But when you look hard, you
Mm.
can still see the damage, plus that bloody great crater that's still there. And Jock in the 70s was picking up machine bullets and bits and pieces, and it's all gone now. I think it's completely cleaned out now. So
Mm.
there's so much, uh, uh, so much, around. But so all the things that happen in my book, there's an element to it, and as the books roll on, I'll tell more and I'll expose more about things. Like in book two, there's a moment when the OTU, operational training unit for the Spitfires, moved to St Athan, or near St Athan, and there's this thing about the bomb shelter being haunted. Well, I got that from history. I found out there was this particular bomb shelter. I think people died in it, and when there was a bombing raid, they wouldn't go in that shelter. People would rather run under threat of bombs to other shelters than go to that one. And even today, people find it a bit scary. Now, I'm not going to sell this ghost story thing. That's for another book, for another author.
Mm.
But what I'm trying to get to is there's a lot in my book that's got some basis. Well, everything is factual in my book. All the combat is real. Every single engagement is real. It's all taken from real things. Exactly what Patrick O'Brien did in his books. Although it's fictional, it was factional, because every single engagement with every single enemy ship is based in reality, and that's what I've done. I've everything in my book is authentic, from the fact that I fly the planes that I write about. I've flown Spitfires for book one. I've now flown the Mustang. I'm type rated. I don't know if I'll be able to write a Yak 3 into book 3 yet. I'm not sure. If I possibly could, I would, because I've got 200 hours on Yak 3s now. So if I could, I would. Will I fly a Phantom for book 5? Yeah, I will. I'll go out to America. If they're still flying, there's 2 civilian Phantoms, and I will go out there and fly one for book 5. So I know how to fly a Phantom. I nearly did when I was a sprog. I got in one, a 2-seater at RF Coningsby, and we taxied out, and it went tick, and we taxied back in, and I never got to fly it. So in fact, the RAF felt sorry for me. So a few weeks later, I went to Binbrook 5 Squadron and got into a Lightning 2-seater, and we taxied out, and it went tech, and I taxied in, and that's the end of my fighter career in the Air Force. I flew the Hawk, but I never flew a supersonic fighter.
Well, both of those trips would have been memorable.
Oh my god, yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, by the way, I'm scratching my nose. I don't take coke, honestly. It's because I've had one of these bugs, that last weeks and weeks, and it gives you throat, nose, and chest.
Yeah.
And I've had it for 4 weeks, all the way through Christmas, which is why I'm knocking this back, because it dilutes my throat, stops me coughing, and in a minute I might dive over there for 30 seconds to get myself a whiskey. But so that's why I'm doing that. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think that comes through in the books, particularly the letters. I think it's quite useful. Like
Yeah.
you obviously get to a point, and then there's another letter, and it I think it helps almost to keep it quite grounded. That it's not this kind of as you say, far-fetched story at all. It's as
No.
you say, it's based on so much stuff that's relatable and understandable. Even some of the cars that you mention in there,
Oh, they're real. The
yeah,
cars are real. Yeah. That's my friend's car. In 2008, when I did book 1, he lent me that car, and I drove it around promoting the book. By the way, folks, this is the reprint of book 1 now with Barnthorne. That was a separate publisher that we did that with. So when you Google In Case of War, Break Glass, make sure you get the modern cover one with the pilot jumping out of the aeroplane, not the old cover, because these are the new ones that we've done now, and it works better, and they look better on your shelf, because you'll end up, by the time we get to 5, as I say, if I live long enough, we'll end up with part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they'll all be the same front covers. So there you go. And he lent me that car, and I drove that car around southern England promoting book 1 in 2008. And so, all those little levers and dials with the advanced retard and the pull this, push that, bloody hell, complicated thing. I actually drove that car around with my then infant son, and it was a magic experience.
Yeah. So just to obviously, we're going to have to be careful not to give away too much of
No,
the plot. But in terms of a general gist of what book, what's the kind of setup of book one? Kind of when's it timed in the war? What's Harper getting up to?
yeah. Um, I can give a little bit away because if there's book two and it's the same character, it's quite clear he didn't die in book one, isn't it? And we can surmise that he's not going to be dead at the end of book two either. Uh, Whereas when I left it originally, I left it as a cliffhanger because something happens at the end of book one. Um, how I set it up was um, that I wanted to follow the day-to-day life of a World War II fighter pilot. And again, I've got a load of separate lives. I'm not a nutcase, but I do have lots of different things in my background. I'm a psychologist, and I was always incredibly interested and in awe of how pilots could cope with the combat stress. And it's one thing having something like that, you're on a, imagine you're on your motorbike and you nearly hit a car in front of you and you swerve out the way and you get out the way and you got away with it, and your back wheels coming out and you powered your way down the road and got away with it and survived, and you'd be living off that story for the next 10 years. But how about you're a fighter pilot and you face combat for the first time, and you see this monster thing coming out the clouds with these stark black and white crosses on it. For the first time, it hits you right between the eyes. This is real. You're actually dealing with this. This is right in front of you. And you shoot at it, or it shoots at you, and you get away and you land. And you'd be sitting there. Most pilots piss themselves. Some of them shat themselves, and a lot of them would puke at the sound of the scramble bell when it was actually just the orderly telling them that lunch was ready. So incredible emotion in one experience. But what about when you do it again in the afternoon? And then you go out on the RAS that night with your mates because you survived and you're absolutely beyond belief, but you're PTSD'd about your experiences. And then the next morning, 5 o'clock, you're up at the First Light, Jeffrey Wellham's book. What a brilliant book! And you have to do it again, and then you do it again, and you do it again. And you also know that if you don't do it, you will be charged with lack of moral fibre, LMF, and it will be told to your local vicar and your local bobby when you go home, and you'll be pilloried by your village because you're a coward. Never mind, you just did 10, 5, 50 combat missions and successfully coped with those missions. If you pull out, you get LMF and you're a dud for the rest of your life. And a lot of them committed suicide. So I wanted to try and understand what was going on in World War II, and how these men coped, and really understand it. Because do I think I could cope? Maybe, maybe not. I think the fear of losing the comradeship and respect of my peers would keep me going. I don't think I come out of the war sane.
Hmm.
Uh, I had a major airline incident in the 90s where I nearly ran out of gas, and the guy I was flying with basically couldn't cope and became frozen in fear, catatonic. And I had to single-handedly rescue the situation and get this airplane somewhere else where we could land. And we landed with no fuel. We couldn't have done a circuit. We had 450 kilograms of fuel in an old airplane, and we we wouldn't have, a typical circuit would be 800 kilos. And I cope? Yes, I did. Did I have PTSD? You bet I did, for about 6 months. Really, really changed the course of my life. I split up with my partner at the time. I'm sure that was a lot to do with it. And uh, how did these guys do it? 2-3 times a day, every day, through the Battle of Britain, from May till September, October, when it came to an end. And then they went off on their ranges and rhubarbs and patrols and circuses out, trying to lean on the enemy, as they called it at the time, and bring the fight to them. Well, they lost as many pilots out in 1941 out in Europe as they did in 1940 in the Battle of Britain. It was as dangerous, if not worse. And again, I'm fascinated. I'm in utter and complete awe of these people, how they coped with it all. And I've tried to describe it, in the books. If you could sort of get any sort of understanding of it, I think that's why we'll still be writing books long after I'm dead about the Battle of Britain. What about D-Day? With the guys running up the beach. The first boats that arrived on Omaha and Sword, and 98%, 92% of them were killed. 92%, 8% survived, some injured. Those first launches up the beach in D-Day. Do you think you could do that? I don't know if I could do it.
As you say, comradeship is perhaps such a strong thing, and I think in the book you definitely understand the concept of the squadron,
Yeah,
and what obviously those men mean to each other. There are some heartfelt losses.
yeah,
It isn't all you know victories and aces. There's sad moments in there.
mm,
Um, there's some funny moments in there, some hilarious moments in there, but I think it is a real mixture of emotions when you read it. Some of the frivolous things they get up to with the women down the pub and nurses and so on, and then
Bruce Hutton in the
yeah,
back of the on the top of the car, and
yeah,
and then not. He exists. He's still with us. That man, by the way. They all exist. All the characters in the book are real people. That's how I managed to write it. So just so you know, every single character and every single event are real people. I dropped off a book to Jock today, who is actually in real life a furniture builder. He builds incredible bespoke luxury furniture, and they're called Griggs and Mackay, ladies and gentlemen, Griggs and Mackay, and I dropped a book off to him today. Well, in another life, me and Jock fly together in yaks and nanchangs, and we'll be down the locks of Scotland every spring, routinely for 25 years this year, flying at 10 foot off the water in formation. That's our little buzz that we do. And so these colleagues of mine that are in the book are all the real thing. So yeah, yeah. So
and just to build on that, so obviously the pilots, rightfully because they are the tip of the spear, get a lot of the
yeah,
attention. But in the book, not all of the characters are in the air. There's quite a high level of characters that are, ground-based
yeah,
characters. Firstly, the relationship that Harper has with his ground crew, I think
hmm
that's a really interesting dynamic that it evolves through the story, and the kind of the cheekiness of it at times
yeah.
is really funny.
Always the best guys really did have fantastic relationships with their ground crew,
Yeah.
and so Jonesy, that's in the books,
Mm.
is my Uncle Pete. So my Uncle Pete, is gone now, but he was my mum's brother, and he was in the army in the early '60s. He went to Aden, and he was a mechanic, and then afterwards he was a lorry driver. And when I was a tiny little kid, he used to let me go and drive his Scamel truck, which was a big wrecking truck, which was the size of a block of flats. When you're 4 foot tall,
Yeah.
it looked like it was 50 feet high. This thing, you climbed up a ladder up the side of it, and uh, so they're all real. And he is that Jonesy character is my Uncle Pete, or was my Uncle Pete. So um, uh, everybody's real. And
Yeah.
what's nice about it, you budding writers out there, if you want to write a novel, and Patrick O'Brien used to draw intensive diagrams, say like a dinner party where he put where where Maturin was sitting, and where Russell Crowe was sitting, and Aubrey was sitting, and blah blah blah, and how they interacted, and lines drawn between. No, 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 no. I could do it much better than that. You make yourself the central character. You use characterizations of people who actually exist, who are your friends, and maybe your enemies too. And some of the people are in that book my enemies. Um, and not that you're that character, but the way that you interact with the characterizations in the book are real. Because if you walk into a bar and there are a couple of pretty nurses, how's Gaza going to go for it? What are you going to do? Oh, I just sit back and stand at the bar and look at them from a distance. No, Gaza will wade in and go, hey, girls, and he'll try and chat them up, and then they'll probably knock him back, and then there'll be two more, and there'll be two more after it, and two more after that. And he just works on attrition. And by the end of it, after an hour of trying, two girls might go, oh, all right then, and start talking. And then I get dragged in, and like by my collar, and end up having a beer with these two women, and that's what Gary does, and that's what Gaza does in the book. So that's the characterizations, and the way that you've flown with them as well. And while we never went to war, the way that my friends would react to me, and let's say that we had a threat like bad weather, which you get in Scotland all the time, and how do you cope with that bad weather? What are you going to do? And how do your friends, what are they going to do? And how do they react to you? That's the pilot end of my spectrum of being able to write about stuff, that I have been in those environments at all levels, which I can't really go into. And so that makes the book real. That's why the book feels real, because it is real. Everything in it basically has been brought together. They didn't have. Hey, that that yak is a Frankenstein, right? That aircraft, is about 41 different aircraft all sewn together and made into one aircraft, because it was brought from Egypt in the 1980s by two French businessmen, and they resurrected out of 41 Yak 3 airframes and Yak 11 airframes. They resurrected 7 Yak 3s. So that airplane is an amalgamation of bits and pieces and of different airplanes to make one authentic aircraft. But it's not a copy; it's a real one.
Yeah.
And that's what my book is. If you think about it, my book is like a load of experiences and things and facts and letters and characters and things that really happened, all authentic, just pushed all together and made into sort of a bite-sized chunk of a real historical novel about what it must have been like, on a fighter station in World War II.
Yeah. Probably one other person to mention, obviously we've spoke about him before, was your former teacher, who
Alan,
makes an appearance in the book.
he does. He was Alan S. Blood, a real man, exactly as he's described, and he obviously made an impact on you.
Yeah, I think obviously hearing the fact, your story and connection with him, and obviously his role in the book, and
Yeah,
how he's kind of set up again without going too far into it, but
yeah,
how it's posed.
yeah. Well, in real life, he was a teacher at my junior school, and he was the first person to introduce me to flying, and like those teachers, they're they can be really inspirational, can't they? And it was just an amazing, strong, fantastic character, and something I needed at the time to really boost me to I come from Basildon in Essex, and it was a pretty grim old place, and my family had done very well a century or two before, but we were going through a bad time. My father was in the oil industry, got blown up, he wasn't working, and I ended up in this crappy old junior school, and couldn't ever imagine how I'd managed to ever be a pilot. And this Alan turned up, Alan Blood, and just moved it all around. And next minute we were at Southend Airport looking around turboprop freighters, and we were on airside. I mean, you couldn't do it today. Uh, Having an incredible experience. All Alan sorted all of that out, and just inspiring you at every level all the time to fulfill your dreams, and it was just magical. He was a magical man. Um, about 20 no 15 years ago, I no was it as long as that? Yeah, it was 15 years ago. I just wanted to meet him and tell him that everything went okay, just that I got to fly. I got to fly fighters, I got to fly warbirds, I got to do all the things I wanted to do. And I chased around trying to find him. I even tried the National Union of Teachers, and um, they've got no record of him. They're rubbish for that. They don't keep any archives of their old teachers, which I think is just crap, basically. And I, just by sheer chance, I Googled him once, and I didn't know his middle initial was S for whatever. I don't know, still don't know what it was. But I found him in the weirdest possible way. Uh, it was on an occult website, and Alan S. Blood had, in the mid 70s, had gone to North London to visit a graveyard where they had seen manifestations. So we're doing the ghost thing again, aren't we? I don't mean to do that. And he investigated it, and this report, which has been kept to this day, talks about him and going to this graveyard in I don't know, North London somewhere. So, and I chased it, and I found out that he ended up in I think Norfolk as a teacher, and then he started writing novels, and he's the most famous one was called The Cry of the Machi. Don't even ask me. And I'll buy it one day and read it. But it was him, and I made contact, and I found him about 2012. I found him, and we started to talk, and all the memories came back, and I managed to tell him, your little lad, one of the kids that you inspired actually made it, and another guy called Jeffrey Hillier made millions in business and did really well, and we're all so grateful, and all this, it all came out, and he was so really happy, but I never got to see him again. And about 5 years ago, I was finally planning to go and meet him. He had a guest house in North Wales, and happily married, and things had gone well and all that, but he died. And it's so sad. I'd love to have met him again, and never did. But I thought the least I could do was to write a character in about him and who he, and I use almost every single everybody else in the book is a modified name, just a little, just enough so they can't sue me if we fall out, and nothing can be done about it. But Alan S. Blood is in that book with his proper name, because he really was. And if he had been World War II, he would have been in the SOE. he just would have been, he would have been a spy or something really interesting, because of the sort of character and man he was. He was just a genius of a bloke. Brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant, and he definitely comes across in the book. But I think just hearing, obviously, how highly you'd spoken about
Oh,
him,
off the
um,
scale.
and to say that he has a really good relationship in the book with Harper as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, I think so. I think we're nearly at a point to wrap it up now. I think the last thing to cover, which I think was is quite a nice feature, is um, through the way the plot of the book goes, White Waltham does feature quite a
yeah,
few times,
yeah.
and obviously, having been there, it's such got a great atmosphere. You know, the also some of the buildings are still the same. Obviously it's still a grass
Absolutely the
strip.
same.
Yeah.
Like every single detail, the whitewashed fences with the ropes in the garden and everything is all the same. Yeah, that I wanted. I sort of live at White Waltham. It's like my office because I'm on the road these days. I, I do this business development, and I'm traveling. I'm never hardly ever at Kemble. I'm always traveling around the world, country, Europe, whatever, and I use it as my office. And it's so historical, and that's why it's written into the books, because it's the least I could do is
Hmm.
to say thank you um, to the Smith family that own it and run it. The fact that the present day clubhouse is the old officers' mess of White Waltham from World War II, and it was just moved to a different location at the end of the war, 1947. The fact that the ATA girls, the air transport auxiliary ladies, the lady pilots, again, which feature in the books, um, uh, are written into the book now for all time. And I love the fact that it's got that female element to it. That it was the women pilots of World War II. My grandmother was a Land Army girl, and my uncle Pat was a bomber flight crew. Um, uh, to write the women into the book, I'm really very. This isn't just PR, yeah, a load of old BS. This really means business to me. I love the fact that the women are there in that book, and ironically, Emmy in book two
Hmm.
is Tom's sister in real life. So Tom Harper is named after my Gaz's son, and Emmy, who's one of the Atta girls in book two, is Tom's sister in real life, and she's learning to fly. She's just gone solo on glider. She's 17 years old. So, and
Oh,
Tom's
brilliant.
18 and a half now, and he's destined to fly. So again, they're all real. All the people in those books are real. They've all got real. And one day, I think if the books are really really sell, I'll write a little piece about who is what in real life. This is this person. That's that. This is who that was. That's
Hmm.
who Alan Blood was. DC. Well, DC, in the books, the commanding officer in real life is the CFI of the flying club at White Waltham, David Coe. In the book, he's called DC, and he's still going. He's an emeritus now because he's 75 years old now. But he is that commanding officer in book one and book two, and again, they're all there. They're all the real things. So what I'd like to leave you with is that when you read it, you're not you're reading a novel, but you're or reading both of the novels, but you're actually reading real life. It's just been compartmentalized to make it a readable story, but which is exactly what Patrick O'Brien did.
Yeah, spot on. And I think, yeah, you've definitely, been able to bring all of that wealth of experience to bear, and yeah, they are really, really good to read. And obviously, in due course, hopefully we'll get through the next three parts of the Song
Yeah,
for
well, I'm
Harper.
I'm on book three. I've been researching like crazy, and whereas before I had a full-time airline pilot's job, and when I wasn't being an airline pilot, I was being a journalist or a display pilot. Now, although I'm this different role that I play, it just I've got a lot of time in hand, and I'm a lot on the road. I'm a lot in public transport, and I
Mm.
can write away. And I've got it's so easy to write on an iPad. Just literally and slip it into your laundry luggage, whatever you call it. It's so easy to write now these days on the road, and I don't mind it. So it's one thing lugging a laptop around. It's another thing just got a little iPad, and I write so slowly that I don't need a keyboard and all that stuff. I don't. I'm a very slow writer. Typically, a book will kill would take me 6 months to a year. So yeah, it's so book three is coming because I know we had a deal that you wanted book three along the line, and I know we are on it. So it's already happening. Here we are in January 25, and it's already it's on its way. How long it'll take, I don't know.
No, it'll be worth the wait, I'm sure. So just to finish for those obviously who are watching, so if you haven't already bought the book, you can head to our website and you can buy the bundle, so books one and two together, for a discounted price. Alternatively, you can get both books individually on Amazon, but that will be at the individual prices. So yeah, head over to our website, barnformpublishing.co.uk, and have a look on the bookstore tab. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we will end the recording there.